Welcome back to the Crash Course Podcast. My name is Craig Crash Collins, joined as always by Brandon Scott, otherwise known as B. Scott. May is here, and with it comes IndyCars returning to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. First up, it's the GMR Grand Prix, and today we're going to discuss the biggest storylines in IndyCar as we head into the month. We're going to set goals for the biggest teams in the sport and say what it would mean for them to have a successful month of May. And we're also going to predict who's going to open up the month with a win at the world's greatest race course. We're really excited to get into it. The month of May is finally here. We're excited for it. One of the best times of the year. I mean, these podcasts that we do, one of those ones that it's kind of like when we do, the, NCAA tournament bracket or the draft or, any kind of that stuff. It's just like that awesome feeling that you get when that month of May is getting ready to kick off. So we're excited to get into that. First and foremost, though, B. Scott, I don't know if you saw this. We've seen a lot of, the Indy 500 is old, and something that made me feel old the other day, and I want to kick off with this. And that is, I don't know if you saw the TikTok I sent you where Back to the Future, speaking of cars, DeLoreans, that's how we'll tie it in. That if that movie were to be made today, the year that Marty McFly would go back to is 1993.
Yes, I did see that TikTok, and it is mind blowing, to think that jeez,
yeah, wild.
I wish I would have had an almanac, a sports almanac like Marty did, with the future, because man, that would have been
well, that's what I think. If you're just smart about it, if you're like, hey, I'm not gonna bet on everything. I'm just going to space it out, make it take some losses intentionally.
Right. Or if I'm just going to bet on the teams that I root for.
Yeah. I mean, for a while there,
because people wouldn't oh yeah, you're just a homer.
Right. Because hey, 2006 for the Colts, the early, the late 90s, early 2000s, the 2010s for a while with the Pacers. You'd be in pretty good shape for a little bit.
I probably would have been in pretty good shape if I just would have taken the money line of Farley Dickinson over Purdue.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that would have been absolutely insane. But yeah, so that was just something that came into my mind, and I was like, I kind of wanted to kick off the podcast with that because it makes me feel old. And what makes me feel old is how fast this year's going, because we're already at the halfway point basically of the year. The IndyCar season is 4 rounds deep. We started off back in, I think it was February. I think the season got started in February this year with the Firestone GP of St. Petersburg. Was it March? Was it early March?
It was March. It was early March, yeah.
I gotcha. Well, Romain Grosjean set on the pole, P1, to kick off the 2023 campaign. Its season started off hot. 6-car pileup in turn 3. Car gets airborne. That was pretty nuts. Romain Grosjean leads the first 31 laps of the race. Scott McLaughlin takes over at lap 37 and wouldn't relinquish it until green flag pit stops at lap 72. And that's where all the madness happened. Scott McLaughlin comes off pit road alongside Grosjean. They race each other hard until they get to turn 4. They both collide and make contact with the tire barrier, which brought out the caution and basically ended those two drivers' campaign to try to win that race. Gave the lead to Pato O'Ward, who then relinquished the lead to Marcus Ericsson. Pato O'Ward, I believe, had an issue. He he had some issue with a shift or something like that. It was Marcus Ericsson taking the lead from there, and he goes on to win the opening race. O'Ward does finish second. Scott Dixon rounds out the podium. Alexander Rossi finishes 4th. Callum Ilott finishes 5th. Then round 2, it's the PPG's 375 at Texas Motor Speedway. Felix Rosenquist starts P1. Joseph Newgarden took command early, picking up right back where he left off from 2021 or 2022 at Texas. Takes the lead at lap 5, leads to lap 66, and then retakes the lead at lap 68 and led until lap 109. He was absolutely dominant. There were still, though, 26 lead changes among 8 drivers in this race. There was a lot of drama late, as 40 of the final 71 laps of this race were run under caution. 4 of the race's 5 cautions came during the last 71 laps. There were 12 lead changes in the final 50 laps as well. Things got really dicey. It came down to Pato O'Ward, who led 91 laps, and Joseph Joseph Newgarden. Those two traded the lead 5 times in the final 10 laps. Romain Grosjean brings out the final yellow of the race with 2 to go, which gives Newgarden the win. He was out front, his second straight win at Texas. Newgarden did lead 123 laps in the race. Award and Alex Palou make up the podium. David Malukas and Scott Dixon round out your top 5. Then it was the Acura Grand Prix of Long Beach. Not a whole lot to report from here because Kyle Kirkwood was absolutely dominant. He starts P1. He leads 53 of 85 laps and scores his first career IndyCar win. Romain Grosjean and Marcus Ericsson were also on the podium with him. Colton Herta and Alex Palou finish in the top 5. And then finally, we have the Children's Alabama Indy Grand Prix, Round 4. Romain Grosjean starts P1, dominates, but again doesn't come away with the win. He led 57 laps in that race. With 19 laps to go, Scott McLaughlin takes over the lead, comes home atop the podium, becoming the 4th driver in 4 races to score a victory in this season so far. Romain Grosjean, Will Power, Pato O'Ward, and Alex Palou finish in the top 5. So your point standings heading into the month of May: Marcus Ericsson is your points leader. Pato O'Ward is 3 points back in second. Alex Palou sits third, 9 points behind the leader. Scott McLaughlin is fourth, 11 points off the lead, and 15 points behind is Romain Grosjean in fifth. Looking back at our preseason picks, always like to do this. Looking at my picks, my champ was Joseph Newgarden, my dark horse was Alexander Rossi, and my rookie of the year was Stingray Robb. So far, just Joseph Newgarden, who, I mean, isn't in the top 5 in points, but at least has a win on the season, has had some good runs. That's really my only pick that looks really good right now, as Alexander Rossi and Stingray Robb have had their struggles this year. B. Scott, you had Alexander Rossi as your champ, but you did have Scott McLaughlin as your dark horse. That's looking good, as well as Marcus Armstrong with the Rookie of the Year pick, and that also looks pretty good up to this point. I will say, I don't know if you saw it, B. Scott, one of my favorite moments of the season was from Marcus Armstrong. He got at the Children's Grand Prix at Alabama. He got the biggest mover of the race trophy, which I didn't realize was an actual trophy they give out. And he finished like 11th, and they gave him the trophy. Like, I was watching on Peacock, they gave him the trophy on the broadcast, and he just kind of looks at it and he's like, "Are they giving out trophies for the 10th loser now?" And I was like, yes, apparently. That's amazing.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's awards for that, like in the Indy 500, so maybe it is something that they do all season.
I knew it was an award. I just didn't know it was like a physical trophy. They handed him a physical trophy. I thought biggest mover of the race was just like, oh hey, that's just kind of a, because a
title,
right? So that's what I was thinking. So yeah, it's been a wild first 4 races of the season. A lot of 4 different drivers have won. We've seen different teams have their moment in the spotlight. So looking at the storylines going into May, I wanted to break this up into 2 categories. Biggest driver storyline and biggest team storyline. Starting off with the driver storyline, I think the first place you got to start is with the points leader. Well, let's get going with him. I mean, I think that's the biggest storyline of the season so far. Marcus Ericsson, he fell to second after Texas in the points lead, but other than that, he's remained in the lead all season. And remember, I mean, he was the points leader leaving the month of May after winning the 500. He jumped from 8th to the lead. As a matter of fact, he was 9th coming into the month. In 2021, he came into Indy ranked 13th in the standings, left May 10th in the standings. So, in other words, he's come into May and the last couple of years has improved where he was in the point standings going into the month. And so that looks really good on him. He's left in a better place than he was before. And IMS overall has been a pretty solid place for Ericsson. 5 of 7 races on the IMS road course. As a Ganassi driver, have resulted in top 10 finishes. He was 4th at last year's GMR Grand Prix. It's his best finish on the road course. And after rough 500s in 2019 and 2020, Ericsson was able to grab 11th in 2021, and of course the win last year. And I mean, we talked about it, briefly in our preview for the season. What does Chip Ganassi Racing look like? If whenever Scott Dixon decides to hang him up, obviously not gonna say he's close to that mark. He's still got plenty of racing in him. I'm sure he wants he's gonna be allowed to go as long as he wants. But he could. I mean, I don't think it would be out of the realm of possibility if he were to if especially if he were to like win his second 500, let's say, or another championship, for him to say, hey, you know what, that's enough for me. If he were to do that? What would this Chip Ganassi team look like if he were to hang it up? You have Pillow, who's his future's in flux. You've got you've got Marcus Ericsson, who up to this season, we were like, oh yeah, Marcus Ericsson, whatever, he has a 500 win, that's awesome. He's won a few races, but aside from that, that's awesome. But we never really have considered him a contender for, or at least not seriously considered him. He's not usually in the conversation when we're talking about our picks going into the year. Who's our championship pick? Marcus Ericsson's name doesn't usually crop up a whole lot. And so, so we wondered, like, whenever Scott Dixon retires, who's going to step up and be that, like, face of Chip Ganassi Racing? And Marcus Ericsson has answered the bell. I mean, he's got a win already. He's the points leader coming into May. He's your defending 500 champion. He's had solid success at Indy. He's just, I think he's had just a remarkable year to this point. So I think that is the biggest storyline, because it's going to be huge, especially if he can leave, if he can leave the month still as a points leader.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a great season. Kind of just carried the momentum from winning the 500 last year straight into this season. I mean, he even had some momentum even last year after the 500. But the driver that's really stood out to me the most right now, or this season up to this point, is Roman Grosjean. I mean, when we look at Andretti, we always look at Colton Herta now, and it's like, and even outside of Colton Herta, you're just kind of like, yeah, there's just it doesn't do much for you. But Grosjean has become the top driver in that on that team, I would almost say. I mean, he's consistently, at least on the road courses, up there battling for the lead in the pole position. I mean, this is a guy that he's what now about 3 years removed from a near death accident in Formula One. And I mean, for him to be able to come into IndyCar and compete the way he has, like, there was some growing pains there. We all kind of expected that, but he's just really kind of stepped into it, and he's becoming one of the bigger names in the league right now. So I'm really excited to see what he has been able to do, and I'm really excited to see how he can, if he can see if he can continue that throughout the rest of the season.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that you brought Andretti up just on the whole, because yeah, Romain Grosjean's season has been really good. Stay tuned for more on that here as we go on throughout the rest of the podcast here. But I'm glad you brought them up, because we talked about what would Ganassi look like when Dixon's gone. I mean, we've talked about the glory days of Andretti, Autosport, how, like, oh man, remember when they had like Dario and Dan Weldon and Tony Kanaan? I mean, that team was just absolutely insane, and they've just kind of been on the not. I mean, they've still been like a prominent team. They've still been an important team in the sport, but it's just kind of been like, I don't want to call. I think it might be mean to call them an afterthought, but I don't think there's been really anybody that we've been like, oh yeah, this team is. I mean, we expect Colton Herta to do well, like you said. Romain Grosjean will have good runs here and there. Kyle Kirkwood, before then Alexander Rossi would sometimes be up near the front, but as a whole, it's just kind of we haven't really seen them be super like in the mix, and they have been this season. I mean, Kyle Kirkwood getting a win, he's been good. Grosjean's been good as well. Haven't heard a ton from Herta, but I mean, he's coming into a track where he won last year. I mean, Andretti's definitely like getting back on the up and up.
Yeah, and it's really kind of like, I mean, it's different talent. We all kind of thought, oh my gosh, they lost Alexander Rossi, Ryan Hunter-Ray has stepped away for a bit. I mean, he doesn't have a ride anymore with Andretti. What is going on? I mean, yeah, there a lot of focus for them is getting into Formula One and making sure they had all their marks there. And it's like, is that taking the focus away from their other programs, like such as their IndyCar team? I mean, because then you got Colton Herta, who's trying to get his Formula One license and make sure he gets enough hours behind the wheel there. And it's like, is there just too much stuff going on that is affecting them? But now to see Roman Grosjean just be like, you know what, I don't. I'm here. This is where I'm racing. I'm one of the best drivers in the world, which we saw when he was in Formula One. I mean, you have to be one of the best to be in Formula One, hands down. And it's just Formula One gets so political with money and everything like that. He lost his ride because stupid things like that. But he's showing he's showing everybody the driver he is, the type of driver he is, and he's a really talented driver, and I think he's eventually going to become the face of Andretti Racing, as Colton Herta looks to make that transition to Andretti's Formula One team or whatever it may be in the future. So yeah, I'm really excited for Roman Grosjean, and honestly, I think you can't count him out in the championship hunt. I mean, it's going to be tough just because the ovals, and he's not. That's not his specialty. But hey, we'll see.
Yeah.
You never know. I mean, we never thought Will Power was going to be good on an oval, and he conquered the beast and won the Indy 500. So you just never know.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Talking about teams that are on the up and up, you mentioned Rossi. One team I want to talk about as far as storyline goes is Arrow McLaren, and kind of talk about like have they been a disappointment so far. Pato O'Ward, he's been good, no question about it. He's not really who I'm talking about here. He's second in points, 2 podiums, and a 4th place finish at Barber. He's been good as we've expected him to be. Rossi was strong at St. Pete. He finished 4th, but then back-to-back 22nd place finishes. He did finish 8th at Alabama, but is currently 14th in the standings. Rosenqvist is right behind Rossi in the points at 15th. First 2 races were disappointing, but 19th at St. Pete, 26th at Texas. He did score a 7th and a 9th in the last 2 races, so it's starting to come around for him a little bit. Just for perspective, Rossi and Rosenqvist were 13th and 16th, albeit for different teams a year ago, coming into Indy last season. So they've been in this spot before. As far as like that's kind of where they were last year as well. So you had Rosenqvist, who's still with Arrow McLaren, who was 16th last year, going to the points. He's 15th this year. Rossi is about where he was last year, albeit with Andretti Autosport, where he is, basically in the same spot points wise. So we thought, it's just been 4 races. It's by no means time to hit any sort of panic button. You still gotta, kind of gel with your new team and figure everything out. So that's obviously part of it. But I think it just has been kind of shocking that there hasn't been more success from the non-Pato O'Ward drivers in that team.
Yeah, it's the team I'm looking at. I'll go into a little bit more depth later, and what the month of May can mean for this team, especially a driver like Alexander Rossi. But yeah, it is kind of shocking that the success hasn't been there. I thought we were going to see a renewed Alexander Rossi, to be honest. That's why I picked him as my champion. I thought, hey, they're putting a ton of money into this team. They want to be considered one of the big boys up there with the likes of Ganassi and Penske. And they've invested in the drivers now, and so there's nothing that should be holding Rossi back. And it's just like it's same story, just different team for him, and it's confusing. Yes, there are going to be a little bit of growing pains going from one shop to another, and then one manufacturer to another. You gotta, he knows what a Honda feels like and how to tell his mechanics, like, hey, this is what his engineers tell him what he needs to get that better. So he's maybe learning. It's the learning process of learning about a Chevy. I don't know. I'm hoping the month of May can being back in Indianapolis where he's been strong can kind of, I don't know, give him a boost. And because I mean, I would love to see him and Arrow McLaren be successful because, like I said, they put the necessary resources into that program to make it be successful. Now it's just everything's got to click. I mean, they did lose. Yeah, you gain Alexander Rossi, but they lost basically their team chief. Um, they lost him to Ganassi, and that's kind of tough. But maybe that might be it. I don't know.
Yeah.
That could be one of the contributing factors. I mean, you lose some a great talent like that, behind the scenes talent, and you got to replace that, and that's not always easy um, to do. And now he's with Ganassi, and Ganassi's having some pretty good success, obviously with Marcus Ericsson being in the points lead.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've talked about, you hinted at it, what a good month of May could look like, for Alexander Rossi, and I've touched on it as well, with Ericsson and all that kind of thing. So let's go ahead and get into it. Let's get into our month of May preview. We've kind of taken a look back at the first four races, given our storylines. Let's now get in to the meat and potatoes, the month of May. And the first thing I wanted to look at was which drivers coming into the month of May with the most momentum, and who has the most to prove. For me, the driver coming into the month with the most momentum, you touched on him earlier, and I'm going to give him some love too. Romain Grosjean. I mean, he's got the most momentum right now. Two P1 awards at St. Pete and Birmingham. He led the most laps in round 4 at Alabama, and with the exception of Texas, I mean, you can make the argument that he could have won 3 of the 4 races so far. He comes into Indy with back-to-back second-place finishes. He's led a lap in 3 of the 4 races. He had a shot at St. Pete before the dust-up with McLaughlin. There's a argument to be made that he could be running away with this points lead with how strong he's been. And remember, I mean, Grosjean did start P1 for the GMR Grand Prix and led the most laps and finished second in 2021. He qualified 9th for the 500 last year, and if I'm remembering correctly, he had put together a solid month of practice on the oval last season. Of course, his race in the 500 ended with an accident, but for the most part, I think he had a successful month on the whole. So he's had his successes at Indy. He's been in front all season, so close to his first IndyCar win, and he's also gotten to watch his teammate get his first IndyCar win in Kyle Kirkwood, which I think also serves as some, could be some positive momentum for him as far as an extra little bit of drive. Like, hey, my teammates won this year. I need to get my first win of the season. So he comes to IMS with tons of momentum, tons of motivation. Romain Grosjean, like you said, and like I've brought up here, is going to be fun to watch and one to watch throughout the month.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. I think, I expect to see great success out of him come Memorial Weekend on the oval? No, but hey, this coming weekend at the GMR Grand Prix, potentially. For me, the driver that I think is carrying the most momentum quietly is Alex Palou. I mean, you look at every race this year. You go back, let's see. Okay, yeah. St. Pete wasn't really much of a factor there. Texas finished third, finished on the podium. Then we got Long Beach, finished, top 5 finish. We go to the Alabama Grand Prix, rounded out the top 5. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. He's just quietly lurking there and been consistent. And how many times have we said a key for a driver to win a championship is just consistency? And he's got it there. And I think with how good Ganassi typically performs come the 500, he has a legitimate shot, I think, of potentially. I think he has a shot of potentially sweeping the month. I don't think he will, but because I think I give him a higher chance of winning the Indy 500 than I do of him winning the GMR Grand Prix. But he's one of those drivers. He gets the track. He knows how to drive it well, and he's just been right up there. And you know, he's young. He's hungry. He's hungry, man. He wants that win. He wants a win. He's been so close several times this year, finishing top five or podium. He wants to stay on the top of that podium for a change this year. And what better place to do it than Indianapolis?
And I'm rooting for him, man. I mean, you look at kind of. I mean, I don't want to say that he's like fallen by any chance. I mean, he
Well,
won.
considering we've used his like rookie year, he won the championship and he
Second
won.
year.
He's just
It was first
second
year.
year.
It was
Okay,
first year with Ganassi.
yeah, that's right. First year with Ganassi, but he was winning so many races or finishing in second, and it's just like so for him to like not be always on the podium, but
Yeah.
still in the picture, you're kind of like, what's happening?
Right. Well,
Is is he
literally.
having a down year? It's like, no, he's not. It's just he's quietly having a really good year. I mean, if you want to look at like drivers that have won, if I had to pick somebody, I'm looking at. I mean, obviously Roman Grosjean for the GMR Grand Prix, but Kyle Kirkwood as well. I mean, watch out for him. He when he was in Indy Lights, he tore that track apart. I mean,
He won like
he's a
11 of 14
very
races that year that he
he's a
won.
very talented driver, and now he's got himself some equipment. I mean, talk about momentum. Getting that win under your belt, that's huge. That's huge momentum for him. But I just feel like Alex Palo's got that consistency momentum, and it's just building up right at the right time. So I'm looking for him to have a big, I'm going to say the back half of the month, a big back half of the month for
I
Alex
mean,
Palou.
we were so quick on it with Pelot that we literally had the podcast where it was like, is this the changing of the guard? The young guns taking
Yeah.
over for taking over for the old veterans, and then literally Will Power goes and wins the title the following year.
Yeah.
So we're like, oh, and I mean, he's been up there. He's just been consistent, but you have. He's just been consistent through it all, even despite not really being in the championship. I mean, I think he was in it points wise, but we didn't really like talk about him that much last year. And then of course the whole McLaren Ganassi issue. So he's just kind of quietly been there. And I mean, you mentioned Kyle Kirkwood. He's literally in the car that won the last time we were at the Indy Road Course. So that's something to make a mention of as well. As far as who has the most to prove, I put on here the option of taking a driver or a team. I'm going to go with the driver. And I'm gonna go. I was going through the point standings, looking at this. Obviously, it's not Ericsson. You could go Pato O'Ward because of the slow start for McLaren, but being second last year in the 500. I'm not really gonna go anyone in the top five.
He had a good car. He had a really good car.
He really did. I'm not going with anybody in the top five in points here. I thought about Joseph Newgarden, one win but two finishes, 15th or worse. He comes in sixth in points. He finished 25th at last year's GMR Grand Prix and has finished outside the top 10 in the last two 500s, but was fastest in the final test last month and has had
he was really fast.
He was really good.
That thing was a rocket ship.
And he's also has an average finish at the 500 of 10th. So I was like, I mean, he's been solid at the 500. Obviously, Will Power at 7th. He's last year's champ. And then I came across who is in 8th. And everybody, who listens to our podcast and boosts our ratings, get ready.
Oh boy,
because it's Scott Dixon. I think he comes in with the most to prove coming into May. 8th is the lowest Dixon has been in the points going into the month of May in the last 5 seasons. First time he's entered the month outside the top 5 in points since 2018 when he came to Indy 7th in the standings. The 27th place at Long Beach is why he's so low. I mean, he's had good runs elsewhere. It's just he had a bad, I think it was a mechanical issue at Long Beach that forced his day to not go very well. Scott Dixon is the all-time lap leader at the Indy 500. He led 95 laps last year, and because before a speeding penalty ended his run at the second Indy 500, he ended up finishing 21st. He started P1 in a fourth of the Indy 500 starts he's had, and has led the most laps in 30% of the Indy 500s he's run. He's just always been dominant in the 500, and we talked about it last year, like about what not having a second 500 like means for his legacy. I know that's always like a meme, like what does this mean for LeBron's legacy? What does not having another 500 mean for Scott Dixon's legacy? And so we've talked about it a lot, and I brought up 2018 earlier and how Dixon came to Indianapolis 7th in points. Well, he went on to win the title that season in 2018. So we know he can get back on track with a good May. He comes to the track looking to atone for last year, which was, this is one of the more decorated drivers, if not the most decorated driver in IndyCar history, and it was an error by him that cost him a shot last year. So it kind of makes it like kind of extra personal for him. He had a rare error on his part. Caused him not to be a multiple time Indy 500 champion. So I think he comes in fired up, and looking to prove that he can finish the job, finish things off in the month of May.
So I'm kind of looking at a team and a driver from said team. I'm looking at the team. This team has needs to do something, like that meme of that pencil drawn character poking something with a stick.
Yeah.
Like do something. That's Ed Carpenter Racing. Like seriously, do something. Like you have young talent, Rinus VeeKay, Connor Daly. I mean, the talent's there. It's just why hasn't it come together? Why does it seem like it does come together sometimes, and then other times it's just
yeah. Rinus VeeKay, a name that I just hadn't thought about until right now when you brought him up. That's just a name it hasn't entered my mind.
Like if it's not the month of May, it seems like that team just is like, we good. Like really? Like I don't know. It doesn't fit the drivers that run on that team. But look, you have a lot to prove in the month of May because this team knows how to race really well come the Indy 500. I mean, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but how many poles has that team won between Ed Carpenter and Rinus VeeKay?
VeeKay was on the front row last year too.
Yeah, they have the speed. Connor Daly, how many laps did he lead last year? Connor Daly looked like he had one of the cars to beat. And that brings me to Connor Daly. This is your chance again to do something. You've been given this huge opportunity. You've bounced around from lower level team to lower level team. You never had the equipment, but you finally landed yourself something solid, but you have to prove it. You have to keep it going. And not only that, but now you're stepping into the 20 car, which has some prestige when it comes to IMS. And can this team capture that magic that they typically have come the month of May? Can Connor Daly capture that magic that we saw from him last year where he looked really, really good? If it wasn't for a bad caution that caught him off sequence, we probably would be talking about Connor Daly as the reigning Indy 500 champion. But it's hard when you see that it's just kind of like they're just there at the beginning of the season. It's like I don't know, and then they'll come out and they'll prove us all wrong. We know that. It's just history. If history is any indication, they'll come qualifying, and they're going to have rocket ships, and then they're going to be leading, and Rinus VeeKay will probably wreck at some point, and Connor Daly will lead about 20 to 30 laps. Everybody will go nuts, and some bad strategy decision will hinder them, and one of the big boys takes home the win again. It's frustrating. Like one of my good buddies who listens to the show, Patrick Lewis, is a huge Connor Daly fan, and it's super frustrating for him the strategy decisions that this team makes. And when he's right up there in position to win this race, and then they like, oh, we're gonna go off sequence and try something here. It's like, this is the back half of the Indy 500. It's not time to try something here. Let's stick with what we've been doing and make adjustments on the car as
Right.
necessary. But it's frustrating, and they just need to find some consistency. And maybe if they find that consistency, they can keep it and keep that momentum growing into the rest of the season. Because ECR used to be one of those teams like that was contending for wins. Maybe not for championships because, Ed only did ovals, but I mean, there was times where Ed Carpenter was, like at Texas, or you got to watch out for him. Now it's just kind of like they're just okay with
Yeah.
being okay and having a seat at the table, even. And it's like, you guys are so much better than that. Your talent is so much better than that. I don't know, but I'm hoping that they can find something, find some momentum in the month of May, where this team typically excels.
I mean, there were times there for a while with Carpenter where we like would consider him a favorite to win, especially at the
Yeah,
500. Like, and that just hasn't been there. So yeah, I'm 100% with you on there. And yeah, you talk about a team like Ed Carpenter Racing trying to get things back on course. I thought something that would be fun, something that we haven't really done before on the show, something to kind of mix it up, is I wanted to do team goals for the month of May. So we're gonna name off I have four, I think. Here we have 2 to 4 teams to kind of say what should their goal for the month of May. And I mean, obviously all of their goals are to win, but we just have other
yeah.
goals. Other goals.
Is Buddy
That
Lazier
was
racing this year?
yeah. Oh my god, like that was
His goal is just to get out there.
when I was making the outline and I first sent you like that message that was like, hey, if you have any other ideas or things to like mix things up, that was my thought. I was like, I kind of like the idea of doing goals, but then like all my mind just reverts to like, well, obviously Craig, the goal is to win. Like, okay, yeah, like yeah, the goal is to win. But
That's honestly the comment where somebody's gonna make in the YouTube
yeah,
comment section.
too big.
Everybody's goal is to win. Duh. Like, okay, but
Right, but deeper.
there's other things that teams want to accomplish. Like,
Yeah,
only one car can win. Like,
right.
what are your goals
There,
outside of the obvious?
there's a chance
I
that
mean,
only one driver will stay atop the podium all month. So I mean, who knows? But yeah. So the way I looked at it was what would need to happen for these teams to leave Indy at the end of the month feeling accomplished. Like, what would they be like? Hey, you know what? We had a good month. Let's use this to get us through the rest of the season. I'll start with Chip Ganassi first for me. I had one goal for them. Marcus Ericsson leaves IMS with the points lead. He's the defending champ as far as the 500 goes. This is the highest he's been in points at this stage in the season. We talked about it earlier. If he leaves Indy with the points lead, it means he's had a good month, and that would work, and possibly might even mean that he has a win as well to go like a second win of the season, which he's not had more than 2 wins in a season his entire um, you know career with Ganassi. So it's like, if he can exit May atop the point standings, if he can leave with 2 wins, going into the back half of the season, because I mean it's only been 4 races. We'll leave with 6. That's still like kind of not even technically halfway, but it feels like this is the halfway point of the season every year when we get to May. It's like this feels like the halfway point. But I mean,
which it's so funny because it is not.
it's not at all. It's definitely not
It's a
at all.
17 race season.
Right.
It's honestly, it's the point of the season where things really kick in high gear.
Right. So, but yeah, I think if he were to leave Indy with the points lead, I mean that would work wonders for him being. I mean, it sounds obvious that he would be in the mix for the championship as the points leader going into May, but like I said before, we haven't really talked about him as a contender for the title. He's kind of an afterthought when we're talking about drivers who will potentially hoist the trophy at the end of the year, and I think that will kind of solidify him as a contender for the remainder of the season. Also for Ganassi, Scott Dixon gets his second Indy 500 win. I know it's obvious, like I said, to have a goal is a win, but after last season, I can't imagine anything else on the mind of that PNC team. They want to get that win, and I can't, that's I think got to be at the forefront of Scott Dixon's mind. For Andretti Autosport, I've got Romain Grosjean wins a race. Doesn't matter which one. Like you said, it's more likely to be this weekend than Memorial Day weekend. But if he can get a win in one of the two races, I think that would be big for him. He's fifth in points. It just feels odd with all Grosjean has done this season, as good of a year as he's had, for him to not have a win this year. I mean, to lead as much as he's led, to show as much improvement from last year to this year that he's shown, to not have a win just feels a little criminal. So I'm hoping he gets a win on the board in this month. For Arrow McLaren, Pato Award leaves with the points lead. Obviously, that would be a great month. But Rossi and Rosenquist, if we can get them two, if not in the top 10 in points. I'm more focused on Rossi and Rosenquist here, not talking so much to Award as far as like who needs to have a good month. And I say close to the top 10 because with the 500 not being a double points race anymore, I don't know how likely it is for them to jump all the way from 15th and 16th into the top 10. But if they can get close, I think that would be big for them. They need a strong month to get back on track. Rosenquist has put together a pair of solid finishes the last couple of races. We mentioned it earlier. Rossi won the most recent race at the IMS road course. He's got an Indy 500 win under his belt as well. Both drivers are capable of putting together a good month. And I mentioned earlier that Rossi was 13th and Rosenquist was 16th coming into last May. Rosenquist came out 9th. Rossi came out 11th in points. So again, I know they were for different, they were driving for different teams last year, but they have shown that they can turn, what was a bad season points wise into at least a better season points wise after a good month of May. So that's what I'm hoping for Arrow McLaren. You wouldn't think I'd have too many notes for Penske because they've been pretty awesome this year. For Penske, Will Power gets his first win of the season. I mean, he's the only Penske driver without a win and has one of the best track records at the IMS road course. For a while, he and Simon Pagenaud were basically the locks for who's going to win this weekend at the GMR Grand Prix. So if he could get his first win of the year, that'd be pretty big for him. And Joseph Newgarden finishes on the podium at the Indy 500. It's kind of odd, but he's never scored a podium at the greatest spectacle in racing as a member of Team Penske. He finished, talk about Ed Carpenter, he finished third with Ed Carpenter Racing in 2016. That was the last time he was on the podium at IMS. He's finished outside, or as far as the Indy 500, he's won at the road course since then. But he's finished outside the top 10 in the last two 500s, despite, usually putting together fast months, being, one of the stronger teams in practice. Like I said, he was the fastest in the final test in April. So let's see if that catapults him into a solid month. So those are my notes. Those are my goals for these teams as they head into the biggest month of the season.
Yeah. So I'm kind of looking at three teams as well. One I've already talked about, and that is Ed Carpenter Racing. The goal is to find your mojo in Indianapolis, the mojo that you typically have come the month of May. The second goal would be to start at least one car on the front row of the Indy 500, and be up there in contention during the GMR Grand Prix. Rinus VeeKay has been in the past a driver that has put a good car on the track on the road course. So this is the perfect time. So for them, find their mojo, start a car on the front row of the Indy 500, and finish podium in the GMR Grand Prix. And most like that meaning like Rinus VeeKay. The next one I'm looking at is Penske. Look, Penske needs to reassert their domination of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. For so long, the Penske name has gone hand in hand with history at the Speedway. And recently, their biggest rival has had more success, being Chip Ganassi Racing. The Penske cars, for some reason, just haven't looked very strong. I'm talking more about the Indy 500 because they're usually, you have a contender or two usually on the road course. But when it comes to the Indy 500 as of late, Penske they come in having strong testing and strong practices, And then when the tough gets going, they fade into the back. And it's just like you think like, oh my gosh, Joseph Newgarden's having a great practice runs, great testing. This is his year. And then they fade. They don't, it's like they need to learn how to carry that momentum from the testing and the early practices. So regain, reassert your dominance um, on the oval for Penske. Um, and then my last one is Meyer Shank Racing. Look, hey, you got some older drivers, but you have drivers that have had success
Mm.
at this speedway. This is a track that has been very kind to your drivers, in particular, Elio Castroneves. The main goal for Meyer Shank Racing are two goals. One, get Simon Pagenaud on a podium at the GMR Grand Prix. Pagenaud has won that race with two different teams. Like, oh yeah, he won with Penske. Yes, but he also won back with Schmidt Peterson, who's now Aaron McLaren. So goal number one, get Simon Pagenaud on the podium at the GMR Grand Prix. Goal number two, it's an obvious one. It's the obvious goal for every team, but this one's different. Go make history. Go make new history with Elio Castroneves. Be the first 5-time winner of the Indy 500. I mean, how cool would that be?
Yeah, I
Think
mean
about it.
for a team
That's a big goal.
for a team that's not, one of the, teams we talk about as far as like having like contenders for a championship and things like that, like to have your team name like etched with that amount of history, I mean, that would be pretty incredible.
Well, your
like,
team name is already etched
well, right, but I
with
mean,
history because
but,
he was with you when he won. He landed his fourth.
right. I'm just saying, like,
But
to stand alone,
this
like,
kind of history,
right. When you look at the
that
page of like, oh, you got all these good teams that have like 4-time winners. Like, there's not a driver for Penske that's got a 5-time winner. There's no 5-time winners. You don't have.
no,
So I mean, to have the only 5-time winner,
and
but
I
yeah,
don't
he drove
think
for Meyer Shank
I don't think we'll ever see a 5-time winner.
with
This is
all the, I mean, because we dove into it a little bit before. I think one of the previous like years for the month of May, like dove into the winners, and like, a lot of the 4-time winners, obviously they're for the big teams like Penske and all that, but like at the same time, and like 3-time winner, I think Ganassi's got a few, but like at the same time, like over the past like 20 years, or like, because I think we talked about it when Scott Dixon last year, as far as like him, like how important is it for him to win at second. We're like, it's much more competitive. I mean, we've had a bunch of different winners. Like, yeah, sure, like in the last like 20-25 years, we've had Elio win 4, we've had Dario win 3. But at the same time, I mean, you had several different drivers win, and even here recently, I can't remember the last time we've had, unless I'm just so completely overlooking.
Takuma Sato.
Well,
Takuma's
right,
won 2,
but not like
no, it was
super
it was
close.
a year
It
in
was,
between.
no, it was 27. He won 2017, I'm pretty sure, and then won 2020. That's probably the closest we've seen two drivers
Yeah,
win. I'm pretty
it
sure that's
felt
how it
like
was.
back-to-back
Because it was
years.
28,
Yeah,
yeah, because 2018 was Will Power, 2019 was Pagenaud, so yeah, it was 2017. So yeah, I mean that's the last time we've had a driver win multiple, like relatively close to each other. But usually
yeah.
in between there we've had a bunch. So like there's so much competitiveness, and even just in general now with like the field on its own. I mean, we're going into May where we're like, I don't really know. Like obviously it'll kind of pan out. We'll have our prediction show where like we've had practices and stuff to go on, but like I don't know who is a standalone favorite to win the 500 this year. I mean, there's so
No.
many different options. Whereas, like in the past, you go into it and you'd have kind of the usuals, like okay, Dixon's going to be up there, Dario's going to be up there, Kanan. We'd have some of those guys to throw out, but this year, I don't know who the favorite to win the 500 is going in. I mean, there's drivers with good momentum. There's obviously, we're looking at, Ericsson, who won it last year, and O'Ward, who was so close, and, Alio, who's always, no matter what car he's in, has performed well at the five. So, but like other than that, like I don't think there's a standalone favorite. So like it's so hard, I think, to win now than it was, like, not to make light of like what Rick Mears did, or what any of those other drivers did, but like. And I'm sorry, Rick Mears is literally the only one I could think of right now. I know there's other ones like Foyt and all that, and Andretti and stuff, but like, or not Andretti.
Andretti wasn't a
No,
four-timer.
no. Yeah,
It was
um,
gosh, I'm
there's like
blanking.
Fittipaldi. He's
No.
not Fittipaldi. Thought Fittipaldi might have two.
Uh Mears, Foyt,
I mean, as far as
Unser.
Unser,
Was it
okay.
Unser? Unser and then Elio. There's only four.
Well, no, I wasn't talking about, like, I was just talking about like multiple, but like just in general. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were talking about four
Not
timers.
just
So
four. No,
yeah,
I
yeah,
wasn't
yeah,
talking
yeah,
about
yeah.
just four timer. Like obviously they're in there,
Got
but
it,
like,
got it.
2, 3, 4, whatever. But like, like I said, not to make light of what they did, but I think it's harder now. I think the level of competition is, as least as the sport is right now, the level of competition is more wide open, I
Oh
think,
yeah.
than it
Well, and
was.
also just because just the number of teams that you have too
Mm.
now, and the technology
Yeah.
is, it's not like, hey, you got a guy that's really good with a wrench that knows how to get the most out of this. Now it's like we have a team of engineers, and our IT guy is our best asset. Um, so yeah, it's totally different. Like you said, not to take anything away from the guys from the past that have done it, because of anything, that was probably it was a great feat in its own, because of just how much like grease work, like elbow grease, went into those cars than they do. I mean, not to say they don't now, but everything is so computer driven now that these guys didn't have. It was just like, maybe if I try this will get it to go faster. Now it's, if you do this, statistically speaking, and the computer says you should have more RPMs. But yeah, it is. It's much more competitive. But yes, that's the main goal for Meyershank Racing, is go make history.
So before we wrap things up, we want to give our predictions for the GMR Grand Prix. We're going to give our prediction for who starts P1, give a dark horse, and who we think is going to come away with the win. So for me, who I think is going to bring the field to the green flag, I've got Pato O'Ward. Last season, Joseph Newgarden and Pato O'Ward were the only two drivers to qualify in the top 5 for both races at the IMS road course. Between Newgarden and O'Ward, only O'Ward has been a part of every Firestone Fast 6. So O'Ward consistently is qualified near the front, and so I think Pato O'Ward is going to be your P1 award winner for the GMR Grand Prix. My dark horse, I'm going with a deep cut here. I'm going Christian Lundgaard. As your dark horse to win this race. He has a couple of top 10s on the season. His best finish came in the last race at Alabama, coming home in 6th. He's had a pair of top 10 finishes at the IMS road courses at the IMS road course races last season. Most importantly, one of those finishes was a podium, as he finished 2nd at last year's Gallagher Grand Prix. He's finished ahead of all, and he finished ahead of all the Penske drivers who finished in the top 5. So it was Rossi who won, Lundgaard, and then all 3 Penske drivers last year. He was able to beat them out. So I've got Christian Lundgaard as a dark horse to potentially take home the GMR Grand Prix.
So yeah, for me, I'm gonna go with, oh my gosh, because it's when you look at this weekend, Friday is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be beautiful. Saturday, there's a 50% chance of rain and storms. So you gotta factor that in. I mean, it's road course racing. They race in the rain. Um, P1, starting P1 for me. Oh my gosh, this one's hard. I am going to say, I'm gonna go with Roman Grosjean starts P1. And honestly, I mean, when you come into May, it's tough to go against past history with this race and not go, oh, I should pick somebody from Penske.
Right.
Um, but it's tough. So I'm gonna go Grosjean as my starter of P1.
He's third of the
And
year.
yeah, so it wouldn't be too surprising. And I already talked about how he is really turning a corner as a driver in an IndyCar. My dark horse, I am going with Alexander Rossi as my dark horse. The last time these cars were on the road course, Alexander Rossi put on a great show in the IndyCar NASCAR doubleheader weekend. Um, and it was pretty dominant in that race. The only person that had maybe had something for him was Joseph Newgarden, but I like Alexander Rossi as a potential dark horse. And like I said, this is a month that could help swing the momentum for him. My winner?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. My winner, though, I'm going with Colton Herta. With the performance that he put on at this race last year, in the rain, and how he managed his rain tires, and he even rebounded from almost spinning out completely.
One of the clips of the
I
year, I think.
Oh my gosh, one of the handles of the
Yeah.
year. Um, and when looking at the forecast for this weekend, it looks like it's going to rain again. Um, so give me Colton Herta as my race winner in the rain. Can I pick one if the rain holds off?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, if the rain holds off, I'm gonna go with Pato O'Ward
Okay.
as the winner, but it's gonna rain.
Well,
It's
Rainer,
it's the GMR Grand Prix. It
that is
always
true.
rains.
It does rain at the GMR Grand Prix pretty frequently. Rain or shine, though, my pick for the winner is going to be Romain Grosjean. He's been so close to the top of the podium all season. He's led at least a lap at 3 of the 4 races this season and has 2 poles, like I mentioned earlier. Last year, he did struggle on the IMS road course, but just 2 seasons ago, he scored a podium for both races. On the road course, he led 44 laps, finished second at the 2021 GMR Grand Prix, finished second at the Big Machine Spike Coolers GP later that season. He's had success at this track. He's been strong all season. Andretti Autosport, I didn't even think of. I was just thinking, like, blinders mode, was just thinking about the last time they were here. I forgot about the fact that, like, hey, Colton Herta also drives for Andretti Autosport. So Andretti Autosport had the sweep
They
last year.
swept it last
Yeah.
year. Yeah.
So, I mean, not out of the realm of possibility for them to make it 3 in a row. So give me Romain Grosjean for the winner of the GMR Grand Prix. I think that's how it unfolds. So
There you go.
So there you go. There you have it. There's your winners. Go ahead and place those bets now. Make sure you get go ahead and do that. Either going with our picks or going right against them. That's also a good strategy as well. But that'll do it for this week's edition of the Crash Course Podcast. Thank you guys all for listening, watching, wherever you may be. Remember, you can like us on Facebook, 3C Media. Go follow us on Twitter at 3C Media Sports. Go over, if you're not already at the YouTube channel, go subscribe to us over on YouTube. Like us, ring the bell, turn on notifications. Y'all were, really killing it in the comments, giving your thoughts on the NFL draft and the Colts draft. So we really enjoy the interactivity there. Go follow us over on TikTok. We're over 2.5K followers. We love making content for you guys over there, so go show us some love. And remember, you can listen to us every week on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify. Wherever podcasts can be heard, you can hear the Crash Course Podcast. You can find me at Crash Course FM on Twitter. B. Scott, where can they find you?
Find me on Twitter at Brandon_Scott87.
Next week, we will be recapping the GMR Grand Prix and hopping into things as the shift then focuses. We shift the focus over to the Indianapolis 500. It's going to be a lot of fun. We can't wait to get into all the IndyCar conversation this month. But until then, have a good one, everybody.